lecture of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav series. As part of the celebrations of the 75th year of Indian independence, ICSSR has initiated series of lectures to review the achievements of India and the prospects for the future in various fields of social, economic, scientific and technological endeavor by the leaders in their respective fields. The field for today's ICSSR Ekam lecture is information technology, and one cannot help but remember the famous equation propounded by our Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji: IT plus IT is equals to IT. Information technology plus Indian talent is equals to India tomorrow. Today, ICSSR has the honor to welcome our chief guest, Padma Shri Shri Kiran Karnik ji, former President, National Association of Software and Service Companies, NASSCOM, speaking on achievements of independent India in information technology and prospects for the Amrit Kal. To begin the program formally, may I invite Shri Kiran Karnik, Professor J.K. Bajaj, Chairman ICSSR, and Professor D.K. Srivastav, MS ICSSR, to please grace us with their presence on the dais. I would also like to extend my sincere greetings to Padma Vibhushan Murli Manohar ji. Requesting Professor Srivastav to please welcome Shri Kiran Karnik sir with a bouquet of flowers. Shri Kiran Karnik was intimately connected with the phenomenal early growth of IT sector in India as President NASSCOM from 2001 to 2008. Later, he helped put the fraught hit Satyam Computers back on track as chairperson of its government-appointed board. He was the director of the board of Reserve Bank of India and has been on many key government committees, including the Scientific Advisory Council to Prime Minister and the National Innovation Council. He began his career in atomic energy and then spent over 2 decades in ISRO, focusing on the use of space technology, especially for education and development. He was associated with SITE and KEDA projects of ISRO and continued his interest in educational communication as CEO of the Discovery Network in India and as a founder director of the Consortium for Educational Communication. Mr. Karnik describes himself as a public, unintellectual, a non-academic with a strong interest in public policy and strategy. Columnist and author, his latest book is Decisive Decade, India 2030, Gazelle or Hippo. He is involved with several not-for-profit organizations in the fields of education and development. He is chairperson of Indraprasth Institute of Information Technology, Delhi, and Helpage, India. He was chairperson of Oxfam India and president, India Habitat Center. He was conferred the Padma Shri in 2007. May I now request Member Secretary, sir, to please deliver the welcome address. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. A very good evening to all of you. Respected Shri Kiran Karnik ji, former President NASSCOM and Speaker of this evening lecture, that is Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav series. Honorable Dr. J.K. Bajaj ji, Chairman ICSR, Param Adarniye Dr. Murli Manohar Joshi ji, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is an honor to welcome Shri Kiran Karnik ji on this evening for this lecture, which is on a very, very relevant topic, because we are talking about Industry 4.0, so that is very, very relevant. So, a warm welcome to you, sir, for accepting our invitation. And your presence inspires us, and many of the persons who are from new generation, I think they consider you as a role model for the contributions that you have made. Let me share one of the key findings today. What I'm talking is that before I speak on this, something on information technology, let me share one of the key findings of MIT neuroscientist on power of the adult brain, because I'm talking about information technology largely depends upon human brain. So how powerful, and last month only on 30th November, this was posted on MIT website by the neuroscientist. MIT researchers have discovered that the adult brain contains millions of silent synapses, and they remain inactive until they are recruited to help to form new memories and absorb new information. The existence of these silent synapses may help to explain how the adult brain is able to continually form new memories and learn new things without having to modify existing conventional synapses. So that is power of the brain. And the development of information technology that we talk today largely depends upon the power of the brain. Friends, India lives concurrently in 3 ages, namely agriculture, industrial, and information, with varying instances of overlaps and constant transition from one to another. The challenge is to manage this transformation. India has long been caught with dichotomy of divides between rich and poor, city and village, literate and illiterate, besides larger socio-cultural ones. Much has been written about the digital divide too, a new societal disorder between those who possess digital devices and have the capability of using them, and on the other hand those who do not. It is believed that information and communication technology, that is ICT, can be mechanisms that enable developing countries to not only close this gap but also achieve stages of development. One can use information and communication technology to serve as a digital bridge, an enabler that not only obviates any digital divide but helps to reduce many of the other disparities in the society. ICT has not only empowered individuals, it is an instrument of governance and central to human life and development. It is a tool of expeditious narrowing of divide in the society and meeting the aspirations of the common man. Establishing a correlation between internet, mobile, and growth of a country, a report by the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations said that a 10% increase in internet penetration in India can increase the gross domestic product, that is GDP, by 1.08%, while a 10% increase in mobile penetration can increase the GDP by 1.5%. Indian IT sector has a great future in this Amrit Kal. India's information technology sector is set to become a US $227 billion industry in the financial year 2022, registering a 15.5% growth. In its yearly strategic review of financial year 2022, NASSCOM said the industry added 4.5 lakh new jobs to take the overall direct employees to 50 lakh people. India has ability to reach US dollar 350 billion in revenues by 2026. The information revolution that began in the 20th century has been driven in most part by a geometric growth in the production of high-tech electronics, including components of computers, computer peripherals, semiconductors, integrated circuits, printed circuit boards, video display equipment, audio equipment, and household electronics. Friends, the growth and achievements of IT sector, especially due to Industry 4.0, that is digital revolution, needs to prepare well in advance for the next generation of geopolitical and social transformation that is likely to take place in the next 10 years, and that we normally call Industry 5.0. The future is one in which humans and machines work with the synergy, and there is a compatibility, and there has to be compatibility between technology and the human element. The fifth industrial revolution encompasses the notion of harmonious human-machine collaborations with a specific focus on the well-being of the multiple stakeholders, that is society, companies, employees, and customers. The people process technology, that normally we call it PPT framework, is all about how the three elements interact. The people do the work, the processes make this work more efficient, technology helps people to do their task and also helps automate the processes. Thus, businesses and the societies can achieve organizational efficiency by balancing the three and optimizing the relationship between people, processes, and technology. With these words, I wish and I hope that today's lecture by Shri Kiran Karnik ji would be definitely adding value to those who are present here and those who will be seeing this through YouTube. So I once again welcome Shri Kiran Karnik ji for accepting this invitation. Thank you very much.
Professor Bajaj, Professor Srivastava, distinguished guests, in particular Professor Madhuri Manohar Joshi and my good friend Professor Deepak Nair, many other eminent people, but I'm very glad to recognize such eminent people sitting in the audience. I'm overawed, I'm privileged at this occasion and this platform, and Professor Bajaj, thank you very much for inviting me. I consider it an exceptional privilege not only to be here on this platform, but speaking on this kind of occasion. And even more pleasure to be speaking in front of such a distinguished audience. I want to share with you this evening some thoughts on where we have come, where we are, very briefly, then look ahead, and then share a few thoughts and ideas on how do we actually make this potential become real. For long it's been said that India is a country with great potential and continues to be so. And that's a bit of a left-handed compliment, saying we have great potential, but we never seem to achieve it. Now, I think we have proven we can do that. For many, many years, this used to be the jibe about India. Big country, a lot of talent, lots of possibilities of what can be done. But for many, many years, we found that our growth was there, but slow. The poor continued to suffer. Destitution was high. Poverty was rampant. And I remember growing up in times when friends, in quotes from the US, would make jokes about ship-to-lip food shipments. This was in reference, those of you who are old enough will recall, to the PL-480 shipments of food grain which used to come from the US. Not quite a donation, but treated like a donation. And we were living, and it wasn't too much of an exaggeration, that we depended on those shipments for our food supplies. So ship-to-lip was not a bad thing. And look at today, where we are one of the biggest exporters of food grains. And today, when the Ukraine war was on, and countries around the world, particularly developing countries, were suffering, it was India that exported a lot of wheat and helped them out. the same country that exported vaccines in millions and millions of doses to help other countries. So we've come a long way, and I think it's a great moment at the 75th year of our independence to take pride in what we've achieved. If you look at any statistic, look at life expectancy, look at where we have moved in terms of infant mortality, look at where we have moved in terms of education, and what progress we have made and what recognition we have. And to me, in many, many ways, a summary of this is personal experience, which some of you who are old enough might recognize. I think it was probably 1969 or 1970, long before some of you were born, that I made my first trip abroad, and then I went to the US. And, traveling abroad in those days, for me it was the first experience, but for many, many others, even the very well-off and privileged in India, travel abroad was a rarity. There were all kinds of constraints. There was no foreign exchange. There were lots of permissions to be got. You couldn't travel very easily. And it was a rare thing to go. So, you were there as somebody who's a bit nervous, not knowing too much. And here I was, 20-something, on my first trip abroad to the US, a big unknown, read a lot about it, overawed by where they were, by their presence, their power, everything about them. And, some leftovers, not so much for me. I must say that a lot of pride, even in those days, post-independence, came from just being an Indian. But yet there was somewhere deep in our DNA, this feeling about the whites. And a politically incorrect statement to make, but let me say it straight away. So I landed in the US, a bit jittery getting there. You go to the immigration desk, you don't know how they'll treat you, what it means, what you should do, what's the next step. And you go to the immigration desk and the person asks me there, passports. So I put my passport on the table, and yet not knowing what, he looks at the passport, looks at it twice, looks at my face, looks me up and down, and then says, why are you here? Rather rudely, I must say, frankly. I tell him I've come here for some work. So, how many days are you here? So I said, I'm here for 7 days. Show me your return ticket. And all done rather peremptory. Rudeness would be an exaggeration, but, it's very direct. And in some style, I realized that American frankness. And so I was quite nervous, put it one by one there, gave him the ticket, showed him where the visa is, looked at it, sort of frowned. And the sense of it I got, maybe my perception, sense of it I got was this Indian. I don't know whether he's legal, he's coming as illegal, he's going to stay on here, I need to check everything. And, frowning, looking down at you and acting very superior. And this is frankly, end of the day, an immigration clerk. And, okay, finally everything does. He stamped the passport and said, go, make sure you leave in 7 days. I said, fine. This was 1970. Things changed, and by the 2000s, maybe a little earlier, when I went to any country in the West, almost any country, I put the Indian passport there. Sir, Indian. And looked up, sir, are you from the IT industry? I said, for some years I used to say no, and then I used to say yes in some sense. And they say, he's very friendly, smiling, puts a stamp on your passport, have a good stay, sir, enjoy yourself. What a change in attitude. And I thought to myself, what's brought this about? What's changed this where the perception on, and I don't use the term immigration clerk in a negative sense, I'm just saying at the sort of, what you might call the common person level in the US, what is the perception of the US and how has it changed so radically in the space of a few decades? From frowning on you, looking at you as an illegal, very doubtful, looking down, to suddenly treating you as a welcome with some respect, some degree of, saying, yeah, this guy's bringing a lot of stuff here and so on. And I realized one of the things was our technological prowess. What we have achieved, even in those years, maybe 50 years after independence, was something where the world had begun to respect and look at us with very different eyes. And through the 2000s, this grew. When India became the place to go to, every investor wanted to come here. It was truly, I'm not using it as a political slogan, but it was India shining. For a lot of people outside the country, certainly. In the country, we had our own issues and problems. But for the world, it was India shining. And India was the star of the day. And the whole attitude changed. And I attribute this, maybe my bias, having worked in those areas for a long time, to our technological achievements more than anything else. Yes, they saw Indians there. They were hardworking. They saw them doing well. They said they bring good values, hard work, family relationships. They mix with people. They talk nicely. But also, the common person who may not have interacted that much with Indians, it was general perception that said, hey, India is doing well. And to me, this, when I look back, is a sort of anecdotal personal story of where the country has reached from where it was. IT industry itself, and I mentioned this in the context of the IT industry, did a lot for this. And I could see this changing. And I said the standard expectation, particularly in the US, was you must be from the IT industry if you're coming to the US. And of course, there was a time when I was very unpopular. One of the magazines, business magazines, they put me on the cover. And I told friends there, which is true, that that's only so I can be a bullseye target for them. Because that was the time they were talking of being, some of you may have heard the term, Bangalored. It became a word, which means verb, which means somebody who's taking away your jobs and shifting them to Bangalore. Bangalore became India, And even this, I said earlier, the same phrase, this was a left-handed compliment. Because if you're taking away work and the jobs from the US, you must be doing something right. And I think it said a great deal about the Indian IT industry. The mighty US companies were getting worried about Indians and Indian companies doing well, eating their lunch, so you might say. And this transformation really was one of great importance, not only because what it was done, but the context in which it was done. It was done at a time and in the context of having no restrictions on these foreign companies to operate here. All the big foreign companies which are here in large measure today, IBM, Accenture, Capgemini from Europe, all of them were allowed here, they were allowed to invest, they started their own operations here, they were free to import, there was very low to no import duty at all on software, and yet the Indian companies, the Indian brands, be it the Tatas, to Tata Consultancy Services, TCS, or Wipro, or Infosys, that great flag bearer of Indian companies, and a lot of others, including small companies, they flew the Indian flag and competed with these foreign companies and beat them at their own game. And I think that brought more respect. And that to me is an important part of the Indian IT story. I can give you figures and statistics, some of which Professor Srivastava Center shared with you, but how big the industry is now. In terms of size, we are India's biggest exporter now, this IT. So it's a matter again of some happiness that India's biggest export item is not some low cost, high labor sweatshop item. It is really technology, it's IT. That's what we export. And in that also, we have moved way up the value chain. I know many people used to speak pejoratively about, coolies, cyber coolies. And I used to tell them, look, if cyber coolies is a job which we are doing, it's providing employment, so it's not bad. But by the way, we are not cyber coolies. We started at one level, but we have moved up. And I said, today, what the Indian IT industry does is state of the art. Any area. And as I said, they're competing with the biggest and best in the world in their own areas. We've moved up and been able to establish ourselves. And to me, these are the important factors. What it has done for the image of India, the self-respect of Indians, the self-confidence of Indians, most importantly, aside from the technology, the exports, and the employment. In the context of India, 5 million people being employed directly may not seem that large. But keep in mind that these are 5 million people in what are called high-quality jobs. The regular jobs with, all the social benefits that go with a job. These are all people employed with high salaries. And, they're happy, they're well looked after. And as I told a trade union friend who was telling me about trade unions in the IT industry, I said, you're welcome, but the fact is this is a different world. It's not that the worker is afraid to go into the boss's cabin, that he might be victimized, he might be thrown out. Therefore, he needs the comfort of numbers and therefore a union. Here, I said, you come to any IT company, you'll find some young 21-year-old push the boss's door, CEO's door, and walk in and say, hey, Srini, all by first name, I'm not happy with what you're doing for this. I said, that's the attitude. What labor union? These guys are so self-confident. They say, I'm leaving tomorrow unless you give me a raise. I mean, this is different. And why is that? One, the confidence of getting a job. Second, self-confidence that I can get a job. Third is the demand in the industry. It's a booming, growing industry, looking for talent. And that's, I think, part of what is important and what we have achieved in these 75 years of independence. To give people that self-confidence, to give people the kind of education that creates talent, and to give people the ability and companies the ability to compete in the world. One other last thing I want to mention in terms of what the IT industry has done over these years. In the 90s, even early 2000s, whenever I visited our neighboring countries, be it Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, even Sri Lanka. They were all going through their own woes. Unfortunate, sad, but they were going through woes. But what struck me the most was when I talked to young people in this industry, in these countries. I used to go and talk, give a talk in colleges or somewhere, or audience, which is a mixed audience with a lot of young people. I would see that they had no great hope, not only for their country, but their own future. And most of them would say, I don't know, what am I going to do after I get a degree? Am I going to get a job? What am I going to do? Where am I going? And when I saw young people in India, what was really most striking, and this is where the so-called, favorite punching bag of many friends who at that time, particularly in the late 90s, early 2000s, used to say, call center industry, what is this? But the difference was, here was somebody who was, in Indian terms, what do you call it? An ordinary graduate, which means, and again, politically incorrect, so please don't misunderstand me, many of you from the humanities, a BA sociology. What job, what future? What are you going to do? That kind of thing. And this person, if he or she was hardworking, importantly, she also was hardworking and able to handle a computer and knew a reasonable amount of English, they would get a job. And guess what? They would not just get a job, they would get picked up from home and dropped back home. And the neighbors around, their relatives, friends, neighbors would see this and say, hey, my gosh, that's something. And what did it do? It made people aspire, but most important, it gave people hope. Saying if he or she, who's like me, and as I said, ordinary graduate, not a super bright person, not an engineer, not a doctor, not somebody who's got very rich parents, if that person can get a job which is good, paying well, and hey, gets picked up and dropped, yeah, how nice. And that gave them hope that if he or she can do it, why can't I? And hope was very scarce in our part of the world in those 10 or 15 years when, as I said, around us was chaos. All kinds of chaos, I won't get into that. And here was India, which is not only beginning to do well and picking up in momentum, but giving hope to its young people. Many were yet without jobs, many had difficulties, but they had hope. And that's what the IT industry achieved. I won't talk more about what it had done in these 75 years, but to me, these are the important factors. And then, of course, for those who are interested, you'll see a lot of figures, a lot of statistics, what we did, how many people we employed, how we have moved up, what is the value addition, what is the fact that it's not just the biggest exporter, but it's a huge net exporter, because unlike, say, gems and jewelry, it doesn't import the raw material, very little imports. Doesn't require great capital intensity, you don't need huge computers. Yes, you need computers, but not that much. The final thing it did, and this relates to a different aspect which I'll touch to later, which is why I want to close that part there, but the other thing it did was the kind of people who got into this industry. And I think just as one example, there are many, many others, but I want to give an example with, it's a name many of you would have heard there for that example, Infosys. Infosys was founded by a few young professionals, none of whom had rich parents or, uncles who left them a legacy, none of whom had, an outstanding sort of business background. They were middle-class Indians starting as professionals who started a job and a career and decided to say, let's do something on our own. They got together, picked up money, and famously, as many of you would have read, from Mrs. Murthy, Sudha Murthy, who funded part of that, and they started off. And today, look where that company is. But what it has shown importantly is not only growth, what a company can do, what motivated people can do, but the fact that professional middle-class Indians could start a company, could start an industry, that you could be clean, that you didn't need to bribe, you didn't need to be corrupt, that you didn't have to do what was looked down on in terms of business. And suddenly, it brought a new thing. It brought a wave of entrepreneurship. It took a while, didn't start immediately. There were some then who were pioneers, but today, that entrepreneurial drive has become a storm. When I go and speak at engineering colleges and say, how many of you want to become entrepreneurs? I see that it's practically everybody raises their hands. Now, they have their own paths. Some say I will work for a few years and do it. Some say I want to, but I don't know. Some say I'm going to study abroad and then do it, whatever. But the intent and the willingness to take that risk and become an entrepreneur is suddenly changed. When I was growing up, what was the aspiration? Government job, which meant lifelong career, steady, slow growth, but you're there, you're comfortable, don't do anything else, take no risks. Now that has changed. They are not risk averse, willing to go, stake their time, their effort, whatever it is money it takes. But also the IT industry has opened up this avenue, as I said, because it's not a capital intensive industry. It's a brain intensive industry. And what is it that we have a lot of in India? Brains. So I always tell people, yes, in the old days, again in my younger days, we would look at, hundreds of millions in those days, maybe 700 million Indians with stomachs to feed. That was the thought. Today, it is 1.4 billion Indians with brains that can be used. And I think that change in concept in mind is very important. And that has happened again because of what industries or sectors like information technology, and I would also count, agriculture, where we did a green revolution. I would count our dairying industry, I would count our atomic energy industry, and of course our space industry, among the others who have done this and achieved this. So to me, these were the foundations that have brought us where we are. So where do we go from here? What happens ahead? And I look at the next 25 years as really building on this foundation. The foundations always, whether it's a building or your own life, take a long time. And if you're on a firm foundation, you can build fast and quickly. And I think that's where we are today. Now is the time over the next 25 years and extending beyond that, where we can build rapidly on this foundation and create something that is different, that is new, that serves the country and the people, and takes us into a completely different orbit with regard not only to where we are, but also in regard to other nations. We compete, it's a competitive world. We compete at the level of individuals sometimes for talent. We compete in the level of companies. We compete with countries in different ways. Sometimes, unfortunately, it becomes a competition in force, military competition. And other times, it's a competition of different natures. But we have things going for us which no other country has. And those are something which we have built over these years as a foundation in education through the great institutions we have. And I'll come back to education because I have some concerns there. But we do have excellent institutions. We have absolutely top-class professionals, teachers. Two of them are right here on our front row who've done wonders. They've produced generations and generations of bright brains. Earlier, we used to lose many of them. Even now, a lot of people go abroad, go away after they win. But today, it's no longer losing them. It's become a circular trip. People go there, work or teach for a few years. They come back. Some come, some stay. But they pick up a lot from there. They bring back from there and come back to this country. So I think having laid that foundation of education, of technology, of where we are now set in these next 25 years to really take off. And the IT industry is going to be one, to me, that's going to be the torchbearer as we go ahead. Why the IT industry? Because today, it's no longer a sector by itself. It has become ubiquitous. To even talk of the IT industry is really an antonym. There's no IT industry. IT is in everything. So, what do you do with IT? It becomes like electricity. It becomes like air. It's everywhere. You go into a small shop, and he has a computer. If he doesn't have a computer, he's doing things on his cell phone. Forget the small shop. Give you another anecdote of the use of IT, and I want to come to that part of IT, which excites me more than anything else. Professor Srivastava mentioned how the digital divides in our society and how we need to look at them and do what we can do. To me, these are the technologies, the digital technologies, that can build bridges for the other schisms in our society. Rich and poor, rural and urban. It just negates them all. The first thing it did, the ICT in general, including communication, was to end distance. As they say, geography is history. It's gone. What does distance mean any longer? Distance is in terms of how much time you may take physically to travel. But when you're on a Zoom call with a friend, what is distance? You connect with anybody anywhere in the world instantaneously in real time, right here, right now. So distance has been destroyed completely. And the IT industry, as we move ahead, is going to be no longer an IT industry, it's IT in everything. So, I said from a small shop to a small person who's there. And to me, one excellent example, I mentioned Zoom, is the 2 years when we went through a terrible COVID time and there were lockdowns. And again, a brief anecdote that to me brought home how powerfully this is used by people, again, you might say people whom you don't expect to be using IT, and what role it plays in day-to-day things. When we had a lockdown, a lot of people suffered, including small shops in markets and shop owners, particularly those who were selling, vegetables, fruit. And I take this anecdote from somebody who was selling fish. Small fish shop, doing quite well in Chittaranjan Park, which those of you who are familiar with Delhi would know it's a hotspot for fish, because there's a lot of Bengali population there for whom the fish is the favorite food. And, we used to get fish from there when I was in Delhi. We moved to Gurgaon, you ask the guy and you say maybe, maybe not. But come COVID, lockdown, either he has to close down his business or he has to find a new way of doing it. He can't keep fish for long because, as you know, they spoil. So he found the best way. What did he do? He learnt WhatsApp, which now everybody does, whether they're educated, uneducated, man on the street. And what he used to do is to send all his customers whose numbers he had and then got other numbers from them. So he did a snowballing thing to get everybody's number. And he would send them pictures of what he has for sale today with prices and say, please send your order. He would consolidate the orders for a particular area and send them out once or twice a day. Continued his business, not just continued, I talked to him, his business boomed because now he was able to deliver in the home. And a lot of people said, yeah, I want fish, but going to the market, too much of a pain. And he didn't have to pay too much on delivery because as his network grew, which is the so-called network effect of technology, he had, economies of scale, you might say. So if he's delivering to me in Gurgaon, he has 10 people or 15 people who want fish there. So one person brings it to 15 houses. And he's had a small ice box, make do. Again, you might say Indian jugaad. No cold chain, but it was a cold chain effectively. We worry about vaccine cold chains. The guy had his own cold chain. Put it properly in just a thermocol box with enough ice around. It'll come in properly, safe, frozen, delivered to you. It's fresh fish. And his business really grew. Just an example of how IT has seeped into the day-to-day usage of just people who have no idea this is technology or it's IT. He has a mobile phone, he has a smartphone, he knows a WhatsApp. He says, free call me on WhatsApp. My local guy who does the ironing, and some of you in Delhi would know the ironing guy that used to go around on a cart, this is a different view of that. He goes house to house asking, do you have clothes today? So he spends half his time trying to find whether there are customers, and half probably say, not today, come tomorrow. He's wasted a lot of his productive time of actually doing his job, which is ironing. Now he just sends a WhatsApp, or he tells you, whenever you have a thing to give me, just send me a WhatsApp. It's free, marginal data charge of probably a few paise, and optimizing his time. I know street hawkers who have done that. She tells me, whatever the street hawker, that, I'll tell you what I have, and you can come and pick it up when you want. Or you tell me in advance, I'll keep it for you. Aapke liye rakh denge. All done on phone, on WhatsApp. And these are ordinary people. These are not sophisticated engineers from an IIT. They're using information technology for entertainment, for talking to their friends, but for business. So business is growing. This is in some way part of the IT sector, which we don't even count. And these are beginning to close the gaps in our society. And this to me is the very exciting part as we look ahead, that how can we find many such uses where the gaps in our society are closed, where people who are working become more productive. How do you increase their productivity and therefore their income? How do you get them better things to do? And you've all seen this. Again, come lockdown, local area, somebody says, I'm cooking this today, do you want to buy it? And I know people who have grown businesses from that, so-called home chefs, running on a fashionable word today, cloud kitchen. Cloud kitchen is no home cooking delivered to you. But everything is on the phone now. They send you what they have, you place your order, you make payment on the phone through one of the apps. What app? UPI. This is the other part of the story which I want to stress. I talked to the industry, what companies have done, what the government has done, not just by way of policy, but very importantly in terms of creating public digital infrastructure, public platforms on which a lot of people can develop and use apps. The best example, which practically all of you must be using, is UPI. You may not even know what UPI is, but when you transfer money through the phone, in phone banking, net banking, through Paytm, through Google Pay, it's all riding on UPI, a platform which the government funded, created and put in place. And each of these people, whether it's Google or Paytm, they added their little app on top of that platform. There's a new one now coming up called ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce, which will enable small producers with a household. I gave the example of cooking. It could be some handicrafts, it could be anything else. They put it on that and do what Amazon does, but completely disaggregated with no bias, with no pushing or pulling certain products, no advertising. Imagine what this can do for, people in villages who are doing handicrafts or doing something different, where the demand may be in the city or even abroad. And suddenly they have a big market, they have a new market. So this to me is the exciting part of what looking ahead will move through IT. IT direction is going to be so much, it will be in everything. And I'm not talking of the very sophisticated applications on which, I can go on for hours. IoT in manufacturing, which will help us. Robotics, which seems to take away jobs, but will create more jobs because you now have more demand, lower costs, more productivity, whole host of factors. Short-term problems, yes, in industry, in terms of jobs. Long-term, no. If you look back historically, every technology has created more jobs than it's taken away. But it takes time, and there are winners and losers. The losers have to be taken care of by retraining, redeploying, upgrading their skills. Otherwise, yes, there's a loss. But overall, when you look at things like jobs, the fear that automation is going to take away our jobs is as misplaced as bank employees in the 70s and 80s thinking that computers will take away their jobs. As you might know, today one of the biggest employers, continuing even today to employ more and more people every day, is the banking industry. With more and more automation. Today their physical banks are rare. You go to an ATM. I know young friends who say, "Why are you going to the bank? What's a bank?" They've never been there. Everything from your KYC to opening an account to withdrawing your money, depositing money, transferring money is done through some device. What is a bank? Even then, there are jobs being created in that sector. So jobs will come. Automation is not a fear. And therefore, the fear that many people have that looking ahead, IT is great, but it's going to eat up my job. In effect, are we looking at being Bangalored within the country? I think not. By the way, the US experience has been the same. Yes, jobs were Bangalored, they were moved to India, but the US industry continues to have a shortage of talent. They don't have enough people. It's not that they've lost employment. So that story will be replicated within the country. And my hope is that many of these new jobs will move to rural areas. This is the other exciting thing when I look ahead at the next 25 years, that these technologies and other related technologies like communication, 5G, 6G soon, will enable decentralization, no economies of scale but economies of scope, and so you can move industry services to rural areas. Already a lot of people, thanks to COVID, went home and do WFH, work from home. And your home need not be, if your company is in Delhi, it won't be Delhi. You go to your hometown. Lots of people have moved there. It's cheaper to stay. You're staying with family. Cost of living is low. You're happy where you are. And that's going to be the trend as long as we can continue providing high quality communication with facilities in these places. But why are people not going to these places? Why won't it take off? Partly because people who have lived in the city expect a certain degree of facilities and comfort. And those facilities somehow have to be provided. And I've been telling governments that, look, if you want to attract jobs to semi-rural areas, even rural areas, you have to build the infrastructure which makes living there comfortable. Schools, hospitals, recreation facilities, very important. You need a mall, you need a restaurant. I mean, we are human beings. Yes, we may enjoy working and be austere, but you do want to go out, you want occasionally a good meal, you want to go and see a movie, you want to be able to go out and do some window shopping if not shopping. And if these don't exist, then you say, hey, I better go back to Delhi or Bombay or wherever. I can't stay in this small town. But if they are there, why wouldn't you stay there? The air is cleaner, the traffic is less, there's no commuting time. Why would you want to be in Delhi and live in fog and cold and hours of commuting and breathing bad air, worrying about whether your kids are safe or not? Go to where you are. And these possibilities are opening up. They will happen. I can assure you they will. We may take time, but we are getting there. And by 2047, we are going to be among the world leaders in this area. Now, some of this is going to require us to put our talent to its best use, to really hone them and make them as able as they are. And this, to me, there are three critical factors. There are many others maybe, but I just want to summarize the three of them. One is innovation. because what the world is looking for now is what is new, what can I do that is different, how do I do this cheaper, better, quicker, but differently. Our magic mantra in the IT industry was what I just said, cheaper, better, quicker. And I would challenge all the customers to say, look, you might find cheaper somewhere. Better you might. Maybe you say that Europe does a better job than you guys. It's very sophisticated talent there. Cheaper, you might say, yeah, the Chinese might compete with you, Philippines will compete with you. Quicker, maybe, though I doubt, but there may be some countries that do it. But a combination of cheaper plus better plus quicker was only India. But those days have gone. People are catching up, and that's not enough. If you want higher value, you've got to do cheaper, better, quicker, and different, something new. That is innovation. So innovation is going to be one key driver as we move ahead. And I'll come back to why I think we are best suited to be the world's innovation hub. Second is research and development. On this, the story is not good according to me. There's some sectors in which we have done outstanding work, a lot of thrust, a lot of work going on now, even more in the last few years with the new hydrogen mission, for example, which is looking at green energy, quantum mission, which is looking at quantum use of quantum technologies, but we need to do a lot more. And the best example of best metric for that is to look at how much we spend. And you'd be amazed at just looking at the figures. Comparable figures are from 2-3 years ago, but we spend, give or take something, about $18 billion a year on research. The one which is closest to us is Israel, which spends about $1 billion more than us. We spend 18 billion, they do about 19 billion. But as you know, we have 1,400 million people, 1.4 billion. They have 9 million. And they are spending as much as we do. Yes, they are a richer country, but they're richer partly because they spent on this. Then I look at a different metric. What is the percentage of GDP that we spend on research? India, it's yet below 1%. You can go on arguing whether it's 0.6 or 0.7. No, actually it's 0.8 because you're not counted this, and this. But it's well below 1% on which there's no dispute. Israel spends 5%, Korea spends 4%, China spends almost 3%. And look at our competitor, we are very concerned about China. We spend 18 billion, they spent 300 billion. How are we going to compete with them? Money is not everything, let me stress that, but money does matter. And the differences between 18 and 300, you're asking for trouble. How do we up the ante here? Part of the story, of course, is economic growth. Part of it is change of priorities. How do we make sure we do more there? And I think that's a big challenge for us when we look at research. Because the future, as I said, is technology. And technology is about cutting edge and innovation. And that means you've got to spend more. I talked of quantum. We've got a quantum mission, reasonably well funded to start with. But how do we push it ahead? How do we make sure that quantum computing, quantum cryptography, quantum communication, which are all things of the future, whether they come 5 years from now or 10 years from now or 15 years from now, this is the future. And as we were in space and atomic energy, we've got to be at least among the top 5, if not number 1. And we can't do that unless we do what we did in the early years of independence, and I go back to that, which is make the investments in infrastructure in these areas. We started early in atomic energy, very early, even pre-independence. We started early in space in a very small way. It's been a frugal program, very low cost, but we started early. And in all these areas, we created the organizational infrastructure, which the government created. Let's not forget that. It was not some private sector company that did it. It was the government that helped to create this. And then it triggered a lot of things. It triggered everything else. Many people credit the IT success to private sector, true. But the foundation was laid by government institutions like the IITs. It was laid by big public sector companies in the engineering and technology space in Bangalore, for example, Hindustan Aeronautics, ITI. Some of you may know these names, some may not even know the names. But they created a technological culture and they created the talent which created the IT industry. So both atomic energy space and in IT, that became a crucial factor, organizational thing. So innovation, R&D, and the third is education. And this is key because it's all about talent. All about talent. Professor Srivastava mentioned the equation that our Prime Minister gave. So true. India's tomorrow is about Indian information technology, but about Indian talent. And that's across the board, not just in technology, not just in information technology. What do we do there? As I said earlier, we've created some excellent, outstanding institutions. But we've got to start at the foundations. It's great to have an IIT and IIM. But I always ask all my friends in government that if the governments, multiple governments through multiple parties have created these great institutions which are not only the best in the country by far. Tell me one engineering college is as good as IIT, or one business school that can really compete with IIM, Ahmedabad or Bangalore. I think you'll be hard pressed to even find one. You may find one, but no more. Given that, why is it that our government schools are in such horrid shape? I mean, horrid is, I think, a bit of an understatement. There's some that do well, but most are just terrible. There's no teaching, there's no learning. Every survey says that 5th standard children can't read second standard book. 5th standard children can't do simple division which is taught in 2nd or 3rd grade. Why? It's neglect. Maybe it's politicization across the board, locally, state government, central government, whoever. The fact is, we are not building the foundation, which is why I talked so much about the IT industry and the foundation that was laid. If your foundation at the school level is not good, then you're just playing a statistical game. I have X 100 million, 200 million people in schools. So sure, even if 2% of them do well, that's 4 million. Good enough, I can make do. But that's not the future. First, it creates inequity on a huge scale. Second, we need more people. Not only for ourselves, we can be the talent hub for the world, which we are beginning to do in many areas. We can provide talent around the world to countries that are short of people, short of talent. And that's going to be across the world globe. Even our big neighbor to the north, let me not say if, when we have good relations with them, they're a rapidly aging population. They desperately will need immigrants, talented immigrants. Who else? We are the ones that have a growing population, good or bad, for the next 8-10 years, and then it will continue to grow slowly, will level off only in maybe 2050. It's a window for us because it helps us with the demographic dividend. But it helps us only if these people are educated, talented, and put to use. So I think these are 3 key areas to me: education, innovation, research. And finally, and I want to close on this, all this depends on good organization. When I look at the space program, just today somebody was telling me you were associated. Yes, long ago, but the early years. What is different in it? It's a government organization. I was a government employee for 23 years. Regular government employee carrying a Government of India ID card. What is different about these organizations that they are at least perceived, and I think genuinely so, as having achieved? Whereas many, many others don't. Many fail, many do dismally, many are bureaucratic. They have no success. Why? And to me, it's about leadership and organization. And the one example I want to close with where we have failed, and which is why I talked of education, is just that area, education. You have a highly bureaucratic system, highly centralized, driven by control, whereas the crux of this country, the genius of this country is diversity. It's the diversity that triggers innovation. And if you do away with that diversity, saying one syllabus, one standard, one exam, one course, one style of functioning, I think that's the death knell. I'm making an extreme statement, but I'm saying so. The autonomy and the ability to innovate requires that autonomy to be different to fail. Without doubt, you will fail. Which program hasn't failed? Or space program, of which I am so proud, I'm sure all of you, has had its failures. So yes, some will fail. But if you want to put a uniform, high control and standardization, you will get uniformity and you will get mediocrity. If you want excellence, you've got to be willing to give a degree of autonomy, let people do what they want, try out different things, try out diverse courses. Without that, it will not work. And our education system become rigid and ossified. There are, yes, some outstanding institutions that yet do great work, that have flexibility, that have autonomy, but the system as a whole is highly structured, very controlled. And to me, that's not something that's going to work very well, looking ahead. So, I want to end, though not on this note, but on the very optimistic note which I reflected and started with. We built a strong foundation over these 75 years in all areas, information technology in particular, which I've spoke about, which is the theme today. The next 25 years I see as a boom period for all technology areas, particularly information technology, and that's going to be the engine that will drive growth in the country. And I see this as being a great part of what we will achieve by 2047, by which time we should be really number one in many areas, even more proud of the country than we are today, and able to not only hold our head high, but get tremendous respect around the world for our technological achievements, apart from our soft power, which is amazing. Let me end on that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Karnik sir, for this enriching lecture and truly painting the picture of the past and future of IT in India and from India. Please may I request, dear Chairman sir, for delivering the concluding remarks.
I think it's working, right? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Karnik, for a very engaging talk. He has covered the whole gamut starting from 1970s perhaps, and told us much about the future. And most interestingly, he's done it without burdening us with much numbers, or he has done it in a very lay, engaging, simple fashion. And for that, let me thank you once again. I want to talk about a few issues with you today, especially because Joshi ji is there. But before that, there's something, I have been working with IT, and all of us have been. I have been working with IT from the early days when the laptops were, there was of course not on the first computers would have come into India. I used to work with the IBM 1620, and then this 1410, and where you had to do everything by hand. But slowly India has been in the IT sector growing. There was a period, the 2K period, when we were very fast. But personally, I have been feeling that last few years, the change has been very rapid. Well, I'll just give one example, that about 5-6 years ago, I shifted to a small place, a suburb of Chennai city. It is not really outside Chennai, but it's a suburb to the western part of it. And on reaching there, I found that there was really no access to internet. There was no way I could. I used to use that after a year or so, Jio brought out that dongle. And earlier I was trying to use the Vodafone dongle. Didn't work. And about 2 years ago, now I'm having about 100 Mbps speed there, which is extraordinary. And this must have happened, if it has happened there, this must have happened at many places in India. And some of the examples where we have, till about 10, 15, 20 years ago, the idea was that we are doing IT for the world. And I think the last few years, there are things where it can be seen that we are doing IT for ourselves, especially this UPI. It's an extraordinary platform. The number of transactions will be extremely large. The world will be surprised that what's going on. I'm sure I'm saying the right thing, right? And similarly, the other things he mentioned, the RuPay, especially in the financial transactions, we have done something very, very rapid and very interesting. Similarly, this COVID system that we built up, IT system for COVID that we built up, that was not a simple thing. In fact, I always he said we used to be called IT coolies. I was one of those people who would say that we are IT coolies because we are doing all of it for the others. But now I can see that there are some things which we are using our IT prowess for ourselves. For future, I would like to see, that is my dream, that much more of this ITC, whatever we call it, happens in the Indian languages. It is true that people are able to use whatever they have, but if it were in a multiplicity of Indian languages, and whatever Indian language capabilities available, it is right now thanks to what Google is doing or what Microsoft is doing. We in that field have not done really much in that. And the amount of content in Indian languages available on the internet is still measly. And there's a lot of content in Indian languages that needs to be there. I am hoping something along those lines will happen, because once we start doing things, many things happen, and this, I am sure, will be one of the things that will happen. The other thing I am dreaming is that just as we are not entirely dependent on Visa or MasterCard now for our financial transactions, our dependence upon platforms like Facebook and platforms like Google, we will have competing platforms of our own. And this is also not a very big ask. I do hope that it will begin happening once we start paying attention to that. But now I want to talk about another issue. I don't know, some of you may have noticed that every time I send an invitation for these talks, at the end I am putting a quotation from some classical Indian source, which tries to indicate what Indians have thought about that subject. Say what the Indians have thought about social injustice or social justice. Injustice is the wrong word. About agriculture, how they have thought about space, how they have thought. Every time I have tried to put something there. This time the quote I have given is from Ganita Sar Sangraha of Mahaviracharya. This is from 9th century. It's obviously a Jain mathematician. And this quote is from the chapter on Ganit Shastra Prashansa. It's a long chapter. I have given 4 lines out of that. And these 4 lines are Laukike, Vedike Vapi, Tatha Samayike Api Ya, Vyaparas Tatra Sarvatra Sankhayanam Upyujyate, Kamatantre Arthashastre Cha Gandharve Natke Api Va, Supashastre Tatha Vedye Vastu Vidyas Vastushu, and so on. That in all these arts or sciences, whether it is the science of love or science of wealth or the science of music or drama or poetics or cooking, in all of these, computation is essential. And the translation of Ganit in India or Sankhya in India is not arithmetic, it's computation, because it's always translated as computation here. Because so what he is saying in this text, and this is the Indian understanding, and which I thought the basic understanding of IT, that phenomena can be all phenomena, whether it is of physical sciences or of emotional sciences or whatever, or social sciences, they can be approached with numbers, and they can be computed. This is the essential understanding of IT, that we can digitize all phenomena. And then the other important thing which has happened is that once you have digitized, once you have reduced them to, brought them down to numbers, then you have the capacity to work with those numbers very, that is the other strength of the IT, that we have machines, bigger and bigger machines, which can compute faster and faster. And this was the other main concern of Indian mathematicians. They were really not concerned about proving any axiomatic truths about the world. They were not concerned about whether the ideal forms that the Greeks thought of are replicated in geometry. What they were concerned was that the phenomena that you're concerned with, the measurement that you need to make, how can you optimize the computation of those computation of those numbers. And the whole of Indian mathematics is of that nature, that it is algorithmic mathematics, if you, because it is trying to, the object is not to make a model of the universes. The object is to be able to calculate, to be able to compute it well and rapidly. And in the process, because that is the other item, so when you compute well, then your understanding after computation of the world improves. So I'll give you one example which some of my friends worked with. There is this Nilkant Somayaji of the Kerala School of Mathematics and Astronomy, and that will be, I think, 6th, 7th century. And in that, he has calculated the orbits of, or the equation of the center of the, if I would put technically, of what are called interior planets, the Venus and Mercury. And when you look at that equation, when you look at how the calculation is done, it's obvious that they're assuming that these two planets are moving around the sun, and the whole of the planetary system is then moving around the Earth. So this was in a way heliocentrism, but they didn't put that name on it because they were not interested. In fact, various people are saying that they were not interested what moves around what. That was not the issue there. They are not concerned with the model. What they're concerned is that the orbit of this planet we are interested in. Orbit of this object we are interested in. How well to calculate it. And so they gave you the algorithm for calculating it. And it was done much before heliocentrism became the accepted theory. So what I was saying is, by doing good calculation, you reach new truths about the world, which is also, I think, one of the understandings of ITs, that if we compute fast enough, we can start learning much more about the brain, much more of the human ways of. But Indian way of looking at things in this IT kind of algorithmic kind of fashion, I think the prime example of which is given is of the Panini's Vyakarana, right? So what is, in fact, he is actually, many of the Vyakarana people say this, that he's actually writing it's a machine for grammar that he has created. And this, I think, in the 70s itself, or a little later, many people thought that they'll do something with this. That in IIT Kanpur, there was a big group who tried to see that they thought that we have something like Panini's text, and we could be implementing it on the computers, and we will be doing something new in the process. That didn't go very far. And the world also, I think, moved from this, what do you call it, generating language to natural language processing. They moved in some other direction. But we left this behind because we were not the leaders in this. I have been always thinking,
There is a research now which says that Panini's Chandashastra gives you algorithms to convert all these sutras into digits.
Into digits.
They have been digitalized.
Right.
Even they say Gayatri, you say, and do this is now. And from that you can then calculate more and more of other, you can say, Shastras. Because that an algorithm that gives you the key. And now it has been some 10, 12 years ago, some good research has come over it, how to digitize this
So what I have been always wondering is, and I've been asking people at Rajiv Sangal that why don't you stop this, that if we had continued in that direction, taking Panini seriously and seriously implementing what we are saying that is a machine, seriously implementing it on a machine, maybe you would have learned new ways of.
This recitation of Vedic mantras, you see that there's somebody that wave is like this. This is just like dot and duck. This.
So, if we had continued in that direction, perhaps we would have, of course, we would have learned Panini better, and we would have been leaders in some way in Vyakarana, in the linguistics. But one of our major problems, which I mentioned, that the translation into Indian languages, that kind of machine will make these things very simple if you had implemented that. Now also people are trying. But more than anything else, I'm sure if we had working with that, you would have perhaps also come to by working with it, you would have realized that you can write better languages, computer languages, than what are current. We have moved from the very primitive languages to, but all of them have moved in a certain direction. If we were working in our way, perhaps we would have been also doing that kind of, we would have been producing our own language of writing computer programs. Somehow, it is my understanding, much of what I believe, and I think I'm right, that this great strength in IT is from that mathematical mind that we have, the way of dealing with mathematics numbers that we have. And this is generally recognized that somebody like Ramanuja could do so much because he was from that tradition, that he was seeped in that tradition, that he could do. But we have not pursued that tradition, not into the IT also, where it was such a fertile field to work with. Perhaps this was not the occasion to talk about these things, but I'm planning that since Joshiji is taking so much of interest and he is an authority on this kind of issues, maybe with Joshiji's patronage, we'll start another series outside this Akam series, ICSR Akam series, on ICSR traditional knowledge series. So that, and how that traditional knowledge can be made relevant or is relevant. I'm very sure that if we take tradition seriously, it is not that you reproduce the tradition. You never can do that. That time is past. But you work in the modern times much better when you have some resource of that kind on your hand and you take that resource seriously. Others in the world have taken those resources seriously. After all, the West keeps saying that this science and mathematics is ours and it cannot be of other civilizations because it requires the geometry, as Husserl would have said, it requires the geometric consciousness which arose only in Greece. That is their claim and written of the Western philosophers, written down assessment. They may be right, but if that is true, then there is an Indian consciousness on which the Indian way of doing mathematics, that of Panini and others, is also similarly etched as the geometric consciousness of the Hellenist time is etched on the Western mind. So we should then work with what is etched on our consciousness and show that this is how it will blossom. I'm hoping that the way other things are improving, becoming better, we will move in this direction also. And I am hoping that I'll be able to start this series soon. Thank you very much.
May I please request Chairman Sir to felicitate our chief guest with the momentum.
I'm going to give you a book that his lectures we edited on the interface of science and society.
Oh, how nice. Very appropriate. Very appropriate.
Thank you, all of you, for coming. We have, of course, Joshi ji, whom we must thank every time. Today we have Deepak Nair ji here. He's made it a point to come. He wrote to me, I'll be reaching. I hope he can spare time. And today we have Arun Grover, who is 1 year my senior, and he is was the Vice Chancellor of Punjab University, and for long in here. He knows mathematics much more than what I do.
Now it's time for a formal vote of thanks. Requesting my colleague Dr. Gitanjali to please extend the vote of thanks for today's lecture.
Thanks, Aditi. Namaste, good evening everyone. I feel honored and privileged to get the opportunity to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion of ICSSR Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav lecture series. On behalf of the organization, I would like to extend our thanks and gratitude to our esteemed guest, Shri Kiran Karnik, former President NASSCOM, for his informative and interesting address. I would also like to thank our Honorable Chairman, Dr. J.K. Bajaj, for his constant support and guidance. I would like to inform you all that it was his idea only that to start this lecture, from which we are getting the opportunity to get information on various subjects of topical interest. Further, I would like to extend my thanks to our Member Secretary, Professor Deepak Kumar Srivastav, for his constant support and a lot of encouragement throughout the lecture series. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very proactive and dedicated staff of our institution who are well versed in their job. Finally, I would like to thank all of you to present here and to be with us on this occasion and helping us to make this event a grand success. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
वो लोग खाली ये समझते हैं कि गणना का मतलब क्या है then it comes.
वो उससे ग्रेट से इनको भी थोड़ा
उसमें क्या
कभी वो ऐसे POBC मुझे बुलाते हैं
Want to see the that's the one person. Yeah, I have to do as well. But one must have.
Absolutely, bamboo. There was some effort, but it died out. Bamboo is tremendous. Exactly.
Bamboo is stronger than steel.
Stronger.
Yes, I know.
But they are not mutually exclusive.
No, they're not.
You need steel to heat bamboo.
I know.
Indonesia maker of bamboo xylophone project and then Panda also. He is died. His project research, and this instrument named by S.D. Burma. He is a co-music director of Bollywood. Bro xylophone, Brojo Tanamko Brojo.
So the इसमें frequency to be decided with the size or with the tension?
With the combination. With the combination.
It has to be a combination.
You can think of any product that can be made of bamboo. चाहे आप आज का laptop, mouse, anything. Toys, bamboo, musical instrument toys, and also bamboo food. This as an industry.
Abstract art from bamboo. Sunrise in your doorstep.
Good to see you.
Professional instrument is different. I have bamboo band, or refined. This is bamboo sitar from bamboo. Last time I have been introduced design bamboo sitar.
Sir.
ये जड़ है bamboo.
Rhizome.
No, I am saying
इसका जो स्ट्रक्चर है और इसके ऊपर जो इसका असर है because this
you don't need the mirage people to take till you don't get those music instrument people. This they get to themselves.
इसको बजा.
इसको डिफरेंट हम जब परफॉर्म करते हैं वो और अच्छा है. जल्दी में लगाते हैं इसको थोड़ा अलग है. ये एक तरह है. जनरली एक तरह का इसमें तोबली होता है. मैं थोड़ा बैम्बू से किया. इसका साउंड थोड़ा अलग लगा.
लगेगा थोड़ा सा उसकी वजह इसका थिकनेस और इसका स्ट्रक्चर ठीक से कैलकुलेट
डिस्प्ले के लिए साउंड इसका अच्छा नहीं है, लेकिन ये तबला बाज रहा है।
समझ
इसको बजाओ। ये सर इसका साउंड बताएं।
ट्रेडिशनल खोमुक है जो बाउल लोग म्यूजिक में यूज करते हैं, आपको पता है सर। तो उसको मैं
इसको
मुंह से
इसको दिया
ये बाउल का
ये झरना है उसका
रेन स्टिक।
ये जाम है।
You didn't take your own photo. कैसे?
आज 27
Wonderful. Thank you.
very good.